everyone. This is Mr. Righthouse here to talk to you about The Great Gatsby Chapter 1. So in this video, we're going to go over what happens in Chapter 1, how those things kind of relate to the theme of the book and the themes of Chapter 1, the important kind of quotes and moments of the chapter, and then kind of preview where we are going to head from there. Now, you might be watching this video because you're in one of my American Lit classes, which is awesome. I'm going to help you with all of your projects and tests that might be coming up. If you're watching this because you're not in one of my American Lit classes, but you're in another one, you're in another English 11, you're in AP Lang, for some of you, that's totally awesome. I just want to give a word of caution that in some cases, the stuff that I tell you, even though I am a licensed English teacher, might be different from the stuff that your English teacher tells you. So just take that with a grain of salt. Just know that I'm going to do my best to help you get through this book. I love this book. That's why I'm recording these videos. But just know that maybe you might want to ask your teacher for some help too. Okay, so in this book, we have Nick Carraway. We've got our narrator. Remember, this is told in first-person point of view, and it's told after the fact. So one of the reasons why that is super important, and I think it is interesting, is because we will talk all through these series of videos that Nick is an unreliable narrator, right? He is the kind of narrator that is... he definitely lies. He definitely shields the entire truth in order to make himself look better. So, in this case, and in the case of the entire novel, he will sometimes say things or do things or not include details that probably happened. We can fill in some gaps to make himself look better, to make certain people look worse. So it's something to always keep in mind as we talk about Nick as this narrator. Nick is probably still the most redeemable character in the book. There aren't that many redeemable characters, but we get Nick. He has gone to the war. In literature written in the 20s and 30s, pre-World War II, we get things called the Great War or the World War, or oddly enough, the war to end all wars, because people really didn't know there was going to be a sequel to World War One. So he goes to World War One, comes back to his Illinois town, and is looking for more excitement. He's looking for more adventure. He doesn't really necessarily like being in the in the small town, kind of just running the family business. So he ends up deciding to go to New York to be a bond man. Now, what does it mean to be a bond man? Basically, he's going to buy and sell bonds. This is one of those financial things. It still exists, but in the 20s, it was a way that you could make a living. We would call it now probably a financial advisor or a stock salesman or a bond salesman or a bond representative. But back then, it was kind of this lawless world of go to New York and kind of shabbily learn this trade and go do it. So he goes to be a bond man. He goes to New York. I think it's super important in a world of rich people who, and as we talk about the theme of old money versus new money, Nick's dad finances him for a year. So he basically has a year to figure out whether he can make money being a bond man or not. And he has basically a year to screw it up and to not make any money at all being a bond man. So um, it gives Fitzgerald as a writer and it gives Nick as a character a year to basically focus on the plot of the novel and not have to focus on, well, I was going to go to this party with Gatsby and get all of this plot information, but I actually have to go to work so I can make money to pay rent. No, his dad's floating him for a year, so he doesn't have to do that. It's a really smart comment on old money versus new money by Fitzgerald, and it's also a really smart way to get Nick directly involved in the plot more often. So that's an interesting idea. So he goes to New York. He is living in this rental that is next to this guy Jay Gatsby's house. Now, this is in the new money part of town. Remember, if you're not familiar with the book at all, and I'm the only one teaching you this, first of all, welcome. Second of all, there are two eggs. There's East Egg and West Egg. One egg is the new money. People who made their money recently. The other egg is the old money, people who have made their money for generations and it's been passed down in these large grand estates. So one of the things that we talk about when we talk about this book is that conflict between old money and new money. Nick ends up staying in this kind of clapboard little house that, if you watch a film version, it looks fine, but it's not one of the mansions that we see from everyone else. But it's next to this dude Gatsby's house. More on Gatsby in a second. He meets his cousin Daisy, his second cousin once removed, which is just a strange detail Fitzgerald includes. He meets his cousin Daisy and her husband Tom. He's known them for years, but he's finally in New York with them as well. Daisy is what we would call depressed. Okay, she is definitely what we would call um, she probably has some postpartum depression. More on that in a second. Um, but she definitely is hiding the truth about her life, which points us to another theme of this book, which is what we want people to see versus what the reality is. So Daisy wants everything to be wonderful and magical. She wants people to love her. She wants people to be infatuated with her. She wants to be the most enigmatic person in the room at all times. Daisy is very much part of Zelda Fitzgerald, F. Scott Fitzgerald's real wife, very much similar to her. Zelda wanted to be the center of attention. Zelda wanted to be the life of the party to her own detriment and to the detriment of others in a lot of cases. So Daisy wants to be that person. She wants to be enigmatic. Again, she wants to be loved by everyone. But when she is alone with Nick, we get this idea that she's not happy. And she's in this marriage for several reasons, but lower on the list is love and happiness than maybe some others. And we'll get more into that as we get later into the book, but we catch that early on. And there's a specific quote I want to go over in a little bit that will really point to that. We also get a little bit of time with Nick and Tom. We find out that Tom is a few things. Tom is a former football star in college and kind of peaked in college. He's obviously rich. He's got this fantastic mansion. He's got a family. He's got a mistress, as we find out later. But he also uh, is kind of racist and kind of dumb. So he thinks he's smart. He has fallen into this trap of this like Zionism or white nationalism. My hand is clear. This white nationalism um, that is sort of an issue of like he thinks that it's been scientifically proven that that the white race needs to preserve itself. Now, it was utter garbage then. Nick calls it utter garbage. Daisy knows it's utter garbage. Jordan Baker, the third person we'll talk about in a second, is just absolutely bored by it at all. But this is the stuff that leads us to World War II. This is the opinion that leads us to the Holocaust and things like that. So it's really interesting to see in the 20s, before before the Great Depression, again, after World War One into World War II, that kind of parabellum time a little bit. I think that's what that means, between wars. Yeah. That parabellum time, we have this guy in New York saying that we need to preserve the white race and keep other races out of it. And that's exactly what Hitler would do 10, 15, 20 years later. So as we go through this, the racism and the white nationalism doesn't come up a lot. It's one of the themes I like to talk about with my students just because it pertains to today so much. It's one of those things, it doesn't come up a lot, but every time Tom talks and every decision Tom makes, just kind of remember it in the back of your mind that Tom believes this and is proud to think that he's smart for believing this. We also, again, find out that Tom has a mistress. She calls during dinner, which Daisy is not happy about. They have a little discussion, and that brings us to Jordan Baker. Jordan Baker is a professional golfer, a female professional golfer who travels all around the country and the world golfing. Nick doesn't quite know her at first, doesn't know where he recognizes her. Once he figures out she's a professional golfer, he tells us, the reader, that she's a professional golfer, she's very popular, but also has been accused of cheating. So we've got that in there too. And the only thing we really know about her is that she's super nosy. When they are fighting, when Tom and Daisy are fighting about the mistress, she wants to listen. She wants to make sure that she is listening to their conversation. Nick tries to talk, that she doesn't want to hear it. So a couple of things are really important in this first chapter. One, we kind of set the scene, right? We get all of our characters sort of set up for the rest of the thing. We find out that Daisy isn't happy. She mentions when it's just her and Nick that she mentions that she was happy when her daughter was born a girl, because she hoped that she was a fool, because that is what the luckiest thing or the best thing a girl could be in this world is a fool. That is not the thing that a sane, happy person says. Maybe a sane person, but not a happy person. Not one who is happy with where they are in life. So we end the chapter with Nick going back home. He's got this weird invitation that he's got to go have lunch with Tom in the city, which he knows is probably going to lead to something bad, because he doesn't really like Tom. He hangs out with Tom, but he doesn't really like him. He goes back home and he sees Gatsby. Gatsby is out on his lawn, and he's going to call out to him and kind of introduce himself to him. But we see Gatsby doing something that has confounded generations of students. We see Gatsby standing on his yard, reaching out toward the bay that separates these two eggs, toward this green light on the other side of the bay. And he's like reaching out for the light, and he's shaking, is the way Fitzgerald describes it. Now, we could talk about this for an entire video, this idea of Gatsby and the light and shaking. But what I think we need to talk about at this moment, all we need to say about it at this moment, is Gatsby clearly wants something, and Gatsby is clear. This was a moment where Gatsby was being maybe real and not fake. And I think that is what we should latch on to for now. A couple other themes that show up in this. Again, we talked about old money and new money. We talked about what's real and what's fake. Daisy is hiding this kind of her real feelings to pretend and to put on this facade. Tom is hiding an entire other life that we'll find out in the next chapter. You know, we get to meet the mistress. We meet Myrtle. We see what life is like with the two of them. And again, it's not great. Jordan is acting aloof and acting like she cares about everything and nothing kind of all at the same time. The idea of what's this American dream? We don't really get a whole lot of that yet. We do get the sense that Tom believes that he has achieved the American dream. He has a fantastic house. He has a gorgeous wife. He has all of these things that he loves. Yeah, he thinks he's good. He thinks he's made it. He's fine. He gets to brag about his house. Everything's great. So as we go through this novel, just remember, keep an eye on that American dream thing. We talked about the white nationalism stuff, and really just wealth and its power. Tom and those who were born with money and have money still consider themselves pretty invincible, which you'll see through the rest of the book. So chapter 2, we are going to talk about Tom's mistress. We are going to talk about so many other things. If you have any questions about the novel that I didn't answer here, be sure to comment with them below. I'll answer them in the comments. I'll also answer them in a future question and answers video. Thank you so much for watching. Good luck reading the book. I love this book, so I hope you enjoy it too. Have a fantastic rest of the day.